Former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, is the most consequential Irish woman of the 20th century. A nationwide survey by RTÉ Television in 2010 named her as the only woman in the top 5 greatest people in the history of Ireland. I caught up with Ms. Robinson during her recent visit to China as chair of the Elders, the group of independent global leaders founded by Nelson Mandela in 2007. We are very honored to have this exclusive interview with her on our show as we discuss China-EU ties and China-U.S. cooperation on climate change. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue, Mrs. Robinson. You are here in Beijing for the meeting of the Friends of Paris, a group of campaigners for climate change. Tell us more about this group.
I'm very glad to come back to Beijing for our 5th meeting of this group of Friends of the Paris Climate Agreement, led by your climate envoy, Minister Xie, and Laurence Toubiana, who was very much key to the Paris Agreement under the French presidency. And we are a group of real friends, but we had to meet virtually for 3 of the years. So it is a real pleasure to be here. We had intense, very open discussion between us because we are friends, and really good discussions. And I think I understand a little more of the Chinese position as a result of that.
Where are we now in terms of fighting climate change? You know, the Secretary General of the UN talked about, humanities have opened the doors to hell. It's very strong language. It's a stark warning of our action or lack of action on climate change.
I listen very much to the climate scientists, and they are clearly becoming more and more worried. And we know that the climate shocks are getting more intense here in China and elsewhere in the world.
This year in particular?
Yes, absolutely. It's the hottest year, and all the indications are that, if anything, the science impacts are becoming more intense more quickly than scientists had predicted. So it is serious. I belong to a group called the Guardians of Planetary Boundaries, not just climate, but the planetary boundaries. There are 9 planetary boundaries. That includes, nature, biosphere, what we put up in the air, and we are in danger zone for 6 of the 9.
Wow.
Not good. So, but at the same time, I am more hopeful because I think we realize that we have to take the necessary steps, and we know we must align with the Paris Agreement, and that's the important thing.
Well, speak of the necessary steps, since we are here in China, China is also the largest contributor to this carbon emission. Of course, the fact is also, China is the largest factory of the world. It produces all kinds of stuff for the rest of the world. So, in any sense, how do you see the role of China in fighting climate change?
Well, China is definitely the leader on solar, the leader on wind, the leader on electric vehicles. I think I learned during our discussion that about 43% of the jobs in renewable energy are here in China, and you have 40% of the renewable energy of the world. So that is very significant. But I also learned that because of the drought and severity of the heat, that your hydropower has had problems, and that has meant more reliance on coal. So it's always a problem of moving quickly enough.
Well, China has set up the goal of 2030 peaking carbon emission, 2060 carbon neutrality. People would say that's probably the sharpest reduction of carbon emission in the shortest period of time for a developing country like China. So are you confident that China can achieve that?
I think that is really ambitious and good, and when China makes those commitments, it follows through. Sometimes other countries don't always follow through, as we have seen, but I do think, and I think a lot of us think, that China needs to peak with coal in 2025, and we think because China is making such progress on clean energy, on renewable energy, it is possible. I'm a good friend of Nick Stern, who knows China very well, and in conversation he will say he believes that China can peak earlier. So hopefully.
Hopefully, and also I think last year China has announced that China will not build say coal-powered plants along the Belt and Road Initiative countries. So that's a major step forward.
Yes, that's very welcome. I was here with some of my fellow elders in April 2019, and we had a really good meeting with President Xi and his top officials at that time, and we urged a greening of the Belt and Road, and I'm seeing really that is happening, which is very significant.
In January 2022, you made a keynote speech at the 3rd Hong Kong Forum on U.S.-China relations, calling for U.S.-China to take up to tackle these climate change issues. Basically not only climate change, but also like possible nuclear conflicts. You do see serious problems in that direction. So how, when you look back, tell us more about that.
Yes, I called for open dialogue to rebuild trust between the United States and China, but also to help both countries to work more collaboratively on the existential threats, not just climate, as you said, but also nuclear weapons, and indeed tackling pandemics. I mean, we need cooperation, and we have a new problem. We have AI, artificial intelligence. We need a global solution to that. So I'm really keen that the United States and China and the United States will find more dialogue, and I think climate is helping, because the discussion on climate is more intensive than on some other issues.
What do you expect for the talks between China and the US on climate change?
I think it's important, because we would not have had a Paris Agreement if there had not been that agreement between President Obama and President Xi. That was key. I was the special envoy of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. I'm now chair of the elders, and Ban Ki-moon is my deputy, and very, very supportive deputy. But I remember how important it was that China and the United States agreed. I think all the way at COP28 and subsequent COPs, because we only have about 6 or 7 years to turn the world around to be fully in line with the Paris Agreement.
So we don't have much time to be wasted.
It's urgent. That's why the Secretary General is using very urgent language.
Yeah, urgent language. And of course, China and the US, the two largest contributor to the carbon emissions, they have their own responsibility. Speak of that, like we talk about China, what about the US? There's a concern. There are agreements the U.S. agreed to internationally, globally, but then when it comes to domestic front, there's this House, is Senate, whether they agree or not, that would be sometimes a challenge. Whether that kind of agreements would become ultimately law and policies there.
Certainly, the Biden administration has given leadership, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really accelerating clean energy in the United States. But pledges have been made about climate finance, and we still have to see fulfillment. And there is a problem, as we know, in the divides in Congress in the United States, which is not helpful, and we're into an election year in 2024. It's already started. So all of this makes it a little more difficult. But as we would welcome progress in China, we urge the United States, the elders. We are a group that is brought together by Nelson Mandela in 2007, and we are very global. We are not Western, we are global. We have 3 members from Asia, Ban Ki-moon, the former president of Mongolia, El-Baghdorch, and a very good human rights lawyer from Pakistan, Hino Jalani. We have 2 African, we have 3 Latin American, the 2 from Europe are Gru Brundtland and myself. So we are very global, and we are very concerned to nudge world leaders.
Yeah, yes.
We are modest about what elders can do, but we have a little wisdom to offer.
What kind of a role you may play between China and the U.S., like to bring the two countries together, or the three sides working together, and the strongest economies in the world. If they work together, and they can do a lot, even in the sphere of fighting climate change, instead of pushing China and the U.S. apart, that probably will result in something much, much less.
No, I think it is very much in Europe's interests that we have more collaboration. As I mentioned, the European Union has its own Green Deal. It also has good values of solidarity, of support for international human rights, and so on. And the trade minister was here recently for discussions, and I think that will hopefully alleviate some problems with trade barriers. I can't say how strongly we want to see Europe play a very good role in helping to have better collaboration globally, and in particular between the United States and China. Europe is finding itself, for example, I am honorary president of an Africa-Europe Foundation, where Africa and Europe are finding better partnership, less so-called big brother to smaller. Africa is now much more confident. The recent conference on climate in Nairobi was a very good indication of of Africa wanting to play a role. China is very supportive of Africa, I know, and so the world is changing, and I think we need to see more collaboration if possible.
More collaboration. Yes, collaboration aside, and then there's also in the sphere of there's interests, national interests, economic interests. For example, the EU has announced the investigation into the subsidy issue of the Chinese EVs exported to the EU market. And then, I'm not talking about the investigation, but I'm thinking of on one hand, we do need that kind of EVs, electric vehicle, if it's cheaper, if it's higher quality, that would be the best to fight climate change. But on the other hand, there's a national economic interest to be concerned with. So how can you balance the...
Well, hopefully that's something the trade minister of the EU was talking about when he was here, because it's not my expertise, but I do welcome the fact that China has made such progress, genuine progress. I think we need far more progress on battery storage for security here in China, but also security internationally when we're depending increasingly on renewable energy. We need innovation. You have a young population graduated from university that's still looking for opportunities. I think we need their brains to help us with innovation.
Yeah, just along that line, you do see globally, again, for the developing countries, their priority often is development, economic expansion, welfare of the people. On the other hand, they are expected to also contribute to for the release of less emissions, and also less reliance on the fossil energy. But again, there's a balance you need to make.
Yes, I think we're very slow to appreciate that in order to move to renewable energy, you need investment. And now we have more efforts like what are called the JETPs, which is the language used to help South Africa from the COP in Glasgow, COP26, the Conference on Climate, support, then at the G20 in Bali last year, Indonesia, to give its support to help come out of coal. It's very difficult if you have a dependency on coal and you're a developing country and you need the investment, and the investment is not coming. So the elders very much welcome these developments and want to see more support. And we found that conference in Nairobi on climate just before the UN General Assembly meeting, and very positive, because it was talking about Africa as having many of the what is needed for clean energy: young population, the wonderful forest cover, the carbon sinks, and the rare earths which are available in Africa. So Africa is saying, you know, we have solutions, but we need the investment. And I think we just need to understand this is a global problem where we need more collaboration to help to have developing countries move as quickly as possible. And China can give very good leadership there and is giving leadership.
Do you think there's a strong interest globally to invest in the clean energy in developing countries?
I think there is, but there's also the pressure, especially from the fossil fuel lobby, frankly. They want to have African countries develop the oil and gas which they have found. There's a very big move to invest in oil and gas in Africa, but African countries, not all of them yet, but that was significant in that conference, want to move to clean energy, but they need the investment. They need the skills, they need the training, they need the grid to be developed, etc., the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's a role to be played by the government in directing the national development on energy, but also there's a role probably for the private sector. Yes. Like they needed to focus more on the clean energy rather than more on this fossil energy. Yeah, to seek a profit.
Unfortunately, we see very big profits being made from oil and gas in particular, less from coal because coal is no longer competitive in the same way. But I worry about the huge profits that oil and gas companies make and that sovereign funds make at a time when we have great inequality in our countries. You know, here in China there's great inequality. In the United States there's great inequality. In Europe there's great inequality. We should worry more about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at China as a developing country, they have this long vision plan to develop clean energy. You can see the solar power, the wind power, you know, and also the hydropower together with the nuclear power. A lot of investment, a lot of policy support. Is that the way to go probably for other countries too?
Oh, very much so. I mean, China is really giving the kind of leadership. And as I say, hopefully you can be even more ambitious here in China in getting out of coal, not in 2030, but in 2025, earlier, which would align with fully with the Paris Agreement. And that would really be very... China is so important in the world because everything that happens in China impacts hugely on the global situation. So we, you know, on behalf of the elders, as chair of the elders, we want to encourage China to give that leadership and to give leadership on seeing if we can end this war in Ukraine, which is so wasteful and horrible at the moment. I mean, having been there, and I'm going there again next month as part of this working group, when you go to Kyiv and you see all around, you know, the kind of, you know, the basic unnecessary destruction of lives, of buildings, of land, of ecosystems, with that dam bursting, being destroyed.
Yeah, the dam,
yeah. And so we need to come together on the existential threats, and we need much more cooperation. We need to go back to helping the UN to play a role.
You know, there's I think it's 2015, the Paris Agreement, climate change agreement there. You know, developed world agreed to finance climate change actions in the developing countries, like with, if I'm correct, like 100 billion a year. But that kind of a promise is yet to be materialized.
That was very much part of our discussion in the Friends of the Paris Agreement. It was made very clear that this is a matter of trust. It was promised in Copenhagen, which is a long time ago. Yes. And it appears that the 100 billion is likely to be met, but can you actually establish it credibly? You know, there is still something, but actually it is really important. It should not be a problem. It's not the money that is needed. The money that is needed is trillions. But the 100 billion a year was promised by developed countries as part of a pact to move forward, and it must be fulfilled, and then we must have the private sector come in with trillions when we have the risk taken out by the 100 billion. That helps to de-risk investing in developing countries. And you know, so there was frustration in some measure at our meeting, because we are open with each other. We can talk to each other, and we realize that this is a very, very important issue.
We need that kind of openness to face, because this is a crisis for all, not from one particular country. The 6th edition of the Paris Peace Forum, which will be held like early November, and the theme is interesting. Actually, is in line with what you have said about seeking common ground in a world of rivalry. Share with us what's your understanding of this theme.
Well, I think it's something that's really very necessary. If we look at the threats that face our world, we need this common ground, because no country can deal on its own. No country can deal with the climate crisis, the climate and nature crisis. China was leading on the other convention, and I always link tackling climate and regenerating nature. And I'm very impressed by your air quality has improved very much, which is good. That's one crisis. But we also have the nuclear weapons acceleration. We need China's leadership in trying to reduce the acceleration into making nuclear weapons even more fast, even more destructive. We don't need that in our world. It's not in our interests at all, and yet it's happening. And then we have AI. Who knows how that could develop? So we need, again, common ground in having a governance structure for AI, and we need it quickly.
Yes. Do you see there's any possibility or likelihood for the big powers, in particular China and the U.S., to work together probably on AI, because people are seeing dangers of...
Well, I'm very glad that the Secretary General has said that he is establishing this high-level UN group, benefiting from what is happening in the United States, what is happening in Europe, what is happening in China, benefiting from... but you cannot deal with it in a bipartisan, or bilateral way, or whatever. It has to be done by a governance structure that the UN can frame and that addresses the whole world, whether it's under the UN itself or global accepted, but it needs to be global.
Needs to be global. It's almost like another challenge, kind of similar to climate change. It requires cooperation of all sides.
But we need to remember, we did solve one problem not so long ago, the ozone hole in the world, which could have been disastrous. And we realized, and it was simpler, but we did achieve that success of dealing with the threat of the opening of the ozone layer. We now need to find this common ground on the very real existential threats. I think in particular the climate and nature threat, because as I listen to the scientists and as I listen to the Secretary General's language, we are in danger. We need real collaboration, and the elders are pressing for this very hard.
Do you think there's a positive response from governments around the world as well as from the public sector? Do you think the people, there's enough awareness of this?
Yeah, I am more hopeful because there are more meetings taking place, as we've been discussing, and that is important. The more there is dialogue and meetings, dialogue between US and China, between Europe, European Union and China playing a lead role. The elders are very concerned when you have divides like between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Who was able to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia closer together? China. So I would encourage China to think in terms of being able to play this kind of global role, which is necessary in our world. We have a multipolar world now, and we need to benefit from leadership from different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And this is something the elders would very much welcome.
Yeah, on the Middle East, you mentioned Iran and Saudi Arabia, this rapprochement under the Chinese efforts, but also we are seeing, at the same time, we are seeing like an increasing interaction between China and Saudi Arabia and other countries. We are seeing the efforts made by the regional countries to diversify their, let's say, reliance on the fossil energy too. They see there's a danger, like if you rely on the fossil energy completely for your national economy, you could be left behind because people are looking at the clean energy.
Yes.
That's a positive development?
Yes, I think we really, I mean, the statements from the International Energy Agency are really very interesting. And they do talk about, you know, we are going to see the peaking. And if we see then that, as is happening, clean energy is cheaper and coming on stream faster, it means that fossil fuels could become no longer viable. But we also need something that, because I'm a human rights person, because I've been you know, a High Commissioner for Human Rights, came to China quite frequently, working on human rights here in China, acknowledging progress and also
problems too.
Yeah, problems too. I always talk about just transition when we talk about moving out of fossil fuel. And just transition means thinking about the workers and their communities who have worked in coal and oil and gas. We must make sure that they have special opportunities to benefit from the clean energy, from the green jobs that come up forward. So we have just transition funds. Europe has a just transition fund. My country, Ireland, has a just transition fund for the workers in peat, in turf in Ireland. Quite a small number, but they were in communities together, and they would have been very disadvantaged because we've had to move out of peat. And so we have a just transition to help. That's really very important.
Let's talk a little bit about yourself. You know, you become Ireland's first female president in 1990, and there's a survey, you know, approval rating in office was an amazing 93%. And you have set an extremely inspiring example for women, young women in particular, around the world. Tell us, what's your secrets to success?
Well, I think I was very lucky that people supported me, and in particular, women in Ireland very strongly supported my campaign because I was an outsider. I was not part of the big political parties. I was running as an independent with support of smaller parties. And when women realized that a woman could become president, they became very excited. And you know, if I look at the profile here in China, women are doing very well in business, in commerce, in entrepreneurship, in universities, but not in politics. And I think I would like to encourage, you know, because you need to see yourself when you see a big platform of leadership politically and it's all men. It's not good. we need to have so we need women here, to come forward in all aspects, because you know, it's the economists are now realizing when you have balanced decision making between women and men, it's better decision making right across the board. You know, in every aspect. If you have cabinets that are balanced between men and women, if you have parliaments that are balanced, it's much better for the country.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, you know, as the biggest political I mean, obstacles probably for your career development or for women around the world?
I think there is a problem, frankly, and I worry about it, in many countries with the kind of social media abuse. It is always tackling women, and it has impacted. For example, a woman that I admire very much and know, Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand. It was significantly abuse on social media that caused her to retire from being Prime Minister of New Zealand. And it is a problem, and it's something we need to tackle. I don't know enough about the social media here in China to know if that is a problem that is inhibiting women, but I would really encourage more women to step forward politically, as they are definitely stepping forward in all the other aspects.
Mm-hmm. More participation, empowerment of women in all aspects.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Robinson. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.